Good morning, everybody. I know I left you kind of in a tizzy about Sandy. I really didn't end it because I know you're all very curious, and I know I need to tell you the ending. But it's very hard because I was very, very gullible, and it was hard. It was a hard ending. So when Sandy and I were friends, she introduced me to her mother. Her mother, who owned printing company and was still running it. And her mother was 77, 78, something like that, running the company. And her brother, who was a member of Mensa, which is a genius group, was running the sales part of it. So she introduced me because her mom was having a real hard problem. She couldn't find a really good bookkeeper. And Sandy knew that I had businesses on the side and I was doing books for other companies. So her mother hired me. And her mother didn't like for Sandy to come to the shop. And Sandy and her mother and brother had not good relationships. So towards the end, I was working for mom, and I only worked for her mom um, for 4 hours a week doing her payroll. And then once a month, I would spend a day doing her financials and posting her expenses and her income and getting it ready for the CPA. So at the end, Sandy was pressuring me for more and more money and trying to, have me buying things. And I was getting really kind of, no, I'm not buying that, and saying no, which was not a good thing. Sandy was not used to no. And her mother one day said, Sandy had said something to her mom, and her mom said, you and I need to talk. And I went, okay, okay. And she goes, so let me tell you about Sandy's reality. Sandy's a member of the rich and famous, and she's not rich, and she's not famous. And when Sandy built her house, she used all the money she got from her husband, her whole inheritance, and ran out of money. Her mother came in and saved her and paid off that house, all that she owed on it during the building, which is what her mother was telling me. And her live-in boyfriend was literally paying all the bills because he was, I want to say a master mechanic, and I don't know if I have the right word, of all of the equipment for the wineries. If the wineries had something break down or they needed something maintained, he was the guy they called. Sandy knew everybody. She had contacts. Her wealth was in contacts. She knew how to get to estates that nobody else could get to. She would handle those estates. Did Sandy have the knowledge? No, she didn't start out with it. She had the contacts. Sandy had no money. She lived off of other people's money. I mean, she made some money at the antique store, but nothing that would feed her lifestyle. Her live-in boyfriend fed her lifestyle, and he was older as well. He was almost as old as her mother was. So it was a interesting conversation, to say the least, because I had always thought that Sandy was wealthy, and I had no clue that she didn't have any money. So what her mother said was happening was Sandy would do an estate and she'd pay out of pocket, and then Sandy would bring me a bunch of stuff, and usually it was after I did a big movie, and I did a lot of movies and made money off the movies. And then she knew I had money, and she would come and drop this stuff off. And of course, I would pay her. The shoes was another story. I took my time paying that, but it was after I had done the Titanic, and I made quite a bit of money there. But I had the money was going in different places. I had to live. So I Sandy finally asked me for a bunch of money for some used clothing that I absolutely refused to pay. And at the time, I had lost my father, my two dogs of 16 years, and one job that I had been at for 10 years. We were closing the doors. And I was in such a, I want to say it was so traumatic. They say never make any decisions after a severe traumatic experience. I made a decision and I said, I'm moving to Delaware. Well, you need all these clothes. I said, no, I'll take some of them, but this is all I'm going to give you. I gave her a certain amount of money and she wanted a lot more. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And at that point, I moved to Delaware and called her several times. No, she called me because she still wanted money, and I refused. So I found out her house burned down through a newspaper article. I didn't know that because I had been in Delaware maybe a year or two when her house burned down. I didn't know that until I moved back in 2011, and I started researching to see if she was still in the area and what was going on, and that's when I found out her house burned down. So Sandy was rich and famous area, which so many of them are, and they don't have any money. They're living off others. They're living off the money of others. Now her mother passed, and her brother wasn't like that. He lived pretty normal, and he lived within his means. And they did have money, trust me, but you never would have known it knowing her brother. And I'm pretty sure that her mother left, everything to her and her brother. And so once her mother passed, I'm sure they sold the business and moved on. I know Sandy had no interest in the business other than to know about the money in the business. And her mother didn't have wanted nothing to do with that. She didn't want her involved in the business because, as she told me, she just spends money like water. She doesn't understand the concept of money because she's never had to worry about it. Somebody's always bailed her out. So that was the end of Sandy, guys. Sandy was a character. And I was very gullible and believed everything I saw and heard, not realizing that underneath was something else. And I don't really like to talk about the bad sides of, and I do because it's reality. But she wasn't any different from you and me, to be honest with you, financially. She just lived a different lifestyle because she had all the contacts. And somebody was always bailing her out. She knew how to get money. She just couldn't keep it. So that was the end of Sandy. Is Sandy still alive? I know that her live-in boyfriend passed. But I haven't seen any articles about Sandy. And I know that Sandy had planned to move to Idaho. And I haven't researched it further. Sandy's my age, or a year or two younger. I would bet that she did move to Idaho because she was looking at property there and she wanted to move there. And and I'm not going to research Idaho and see if I can find her. So there's nothing about her in Napa. I don't think she's there anymore once her mother passed. So you guys have a good day. I hope this kind of explains a lot of the comments that I got about Sandy. And it was just not a good ending. I really wished we could have stayed friends, but she was always going to ask me for money. And I didn't have it. I just could not. I could not afford Sandy. As a friend, I could not afford her. You guys have a great day. I'll see you next time. Camo.